all know a guy who only occasionally shaves for big occasions, and it's because that occasional shave really hurts. It's the time of year for big occasions, and yet there he is, suffering with that cheap drugstore razor. Let's help him out. Henson Shaving's line of razors, built with aerospace precision, deliver a smooth shave your dad, brother, and even son can enjoy, eventually. With replacement blades just 10 cents each, you'll buy it once and they'll use it for life. How's that for the perfect gift? Celebrate with 100 free blades on your first purchase, and no subscription headaches. HensonShaving.com/holiday.
Seeing is believing, and you're not going to believe how bright and vivid the colors are on the Samsung Neo QLED and OLED TVs powered by the Neural Quantum Processor, because this is an audio ad. Unless you can see it, which means you already have one. Nice. Samsung, more wow than ever.
Welcome to the No Fruit Podcast,
where we talk about our life experiences with a spiritual twist. Hosted by Maurice
and Kafa. We hope you enjoyed today's episode.
Yes, we do hope that you will enjoy today's episode. Kafa, how are you?
I'm fine, love. How are you?
I'm good, sweetie. So,
Yes.
Some of you know.
I don't know.
Our story, right? So we met in church, and it was for a meeting. We saw each other, blah, 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 right?
What?
So I was doing the blah, 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 blah. I just didn't feel like saying blah, 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 blah. So anyway,
You're going to enjoy today's episode. Do you hear this guy? Oh my.
So what I'm getting at is that, we were at sister Amy churches, but we did not attend the same church. And, but ultimately I would say that, we had become a love affair, if you will, from church, right? We love that we had the same interests by singing on choirs. I was a little more advanced in church politics, where Kafa was a little more advanced in the spiritual space, right? So I think some of that, along with other things, really made us a very, very cohesive and till today, a very strong relationship, if you will, right? Mm-hmm. But here's the fun part. I was talking to my aunt the other day, and she was talking about how people have had, and this is my great aunt. She's in her mid-80s, and we were talking about just, and she and I had the pleasure of going to church with my great aunt and my great aunts, right? And so she was mentioning, and great uncles, and she had mentioned how just who she was around and what she was able to see. The relationships that were going on in service.
Wow.
You could see, because you would hear rumors of what's going on the outside, but you kind of see it playing out on the inside, right? So, so this is the Last Pew, if you will.
Yes.
Version. So, we're not trying to be holier than thou. We're not trying to be politically correct. But I just wonder how many of you, one, maybe started off as a church relationship, right? And how well are you going with that? And I'm happy for you. But how about those persons that, as some people might categorize it, y'all just meeting in the club mentality? Mm. Why you make that face?
Is the club the church?
Yeah, the club, the church.
Oh wow.
Because I listened to what she had to say and just some of the relationships, and she mentioned how people, you could see, or the rumors of where one gentleman is sitting on one side of the church, the lady sitting on the other side, and then he might have had a wife that maybe sat in the middle, a type thing. And so she was talking about how this one guy, how he just didn't care. He was very outspoken and very out front about the relationship with he and the lady that sat on the far side. And almost everybody in the church kind of knew it, and he didn't care. And while we're in church, he and this lady, like, he got the big piece of chicken. The pastor didn't even get the big piece of chicken. He got the big piece of chicken. So that was very interesting to listen to. Listening to because part of that, kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier in previous shows about where you're sitting, right?
Right.
And understand from my church perspective, where we had at the height 1,200 members or whatever else at one point in time. So how in the world can you see this lady all the way on the other side, where you're on the opposite side? There's too many people in there, right? Or at least you would think.
If you have interest in somebody, that's
Right.
That's who you see. You look for them to come through the door. You look for to see what they have on.
Yeah.
All of those things. So no, not necessarily. Even within the crowd, you can spot something.
Yeah, I guess you can.
Especially if something that you feel drawn to.
Right.
Or that you're attached to.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't know. But that's interesting. Up in the club.
Interesting, right? Interesting mindset.
I can see it. Certain people, especially back in the day, I don't know how people do it now. I don't see it that much going to church, but folks would get really, really dressed up.
Yes, they would.
Dialed up, for Sunday service. Again, some of us could think that it was all just to be right for the Lord, giving him your best.
Right.
You put on your best. You put on your Sunday best
right.
for God, for the Lord, for the house of God.
Right.
And then as you're stating, you put on your best when you go to the club too.
Oh, no, you did.
So, looking back, I can recall some individuals at our church who you had to question what they wore and why they were wearing it. Just a little tight, a little revealing. Yeah, and that's the women. Men, I don't know, necessarily that they did anything revealing, but you could tell that they certainly tried to pull out their best,
right,
and wear something eye-catching, if
right.
you will, so they can get that attention. Likewise, like you said, hey, when you're out there in the world and you trying to get that one outfit so that when you walk up in there, that heads will turn and people will recognize you and look at you a certain way. So certainly I can see the same thing going on within the house of God.
And, we have some friends that, they talk about relationships a lot, and they talk about how one of their references would be, find someone that's in the church, right? And if you treat it as the club, is that what you're going to get out of the church? You get what I mean?
I think, again, people take that he who findeth a wife findeth a good thing. And, as you said, certain people say, oh, you need to get yourself a good church girl or whatever. You need to get yourself a good church boy. So sometimes people do look
right.
for that
right.
in those places.
Right.
And I think, is it wrong? Hey, if you want someone who is supposedly a believer, then you're going to look in a church. If you want someone who is well educated, you might look at a university. You know what I mean? So
right.
In that regard, it's hard to say. But again, I think is what you're looking for and how you look for it.
Right.
So, do you just build relationships and friendships and see what happens? Or do you go in there, walking in there like, yo, I'm trying to make somebody my husband. I'm trying to make somebody my wife.
Right.
Or act like it, until until it happens, and if it doesn't, then I roll off to the other one. I think that's the main thing, is that a lot of times those are not necessarily relationships that are building towards marriage or whatever. The way you explain things, like the man is already married.
Well, I was giving the one example that my aunt was talking about,
saying,
right?
You know, so that one individual's already married, and he's got somebody else within his own congregation that he's seeing. And we hear about these stories all the time. Where, you know, whether it's people within the church are dating other people, whether it's ministers, ministers are dating other people. Like you said, within the workplace, it happens.
Right.
You know, hey, if you are committed to someone, you got some issues there.
Right.
You know, so just my thoughts. You know, I'm not one that can really judge you, but you know, hey, I can judge you and say, look, that's not right. Right. By the word of God and what we're taught here within these United States. So something I was thinking about, you were talking to someone the other day about relationships, and someone that you know by acquaintance has gotten married. I think this is like their 4th or 5th marriage. And some of those are questionable, because whether or not there was a true divorce from one of those, and is he just moving on to the next and on to the next? So does he have multiple wives? And everyone tries to get so biblical. So I always wonder, like, okay, well, in the Bible, at one particular time, men did have multiple wives. They had concubines and everything else. So I was wondering, like, is that his mindset, I wonder?
I'm not sure if it's that. You know, I think some people just within them gets bored, or whatever the situation is. I'm listening to you talk about the concubines and all that stuff, but I'm gonna tell you one story that keeps coming up in my mind. It's the story of David. You get what and just how, you know, he saw Bathsheba and he went and had Uriah, I think his name is, killed in battle. You know, so you know, I think if people have that mentality of like, hey, I have authority, I'm in a power position, that I can't, it's my right, my duty, my opportunity to develop other relationships, because sometimes some people feel as though, hey, you can't help it based off of whatever else might be going on. As some people, I've heard people say, you know what, I need another way of relaxing or decompressing. And sometimes my spouse or my long-term relationship at that moment does not fulfill that. Like, I've heard so many different versions and stories and ideas that it's kind of hard to say, or to pinpoint what was really going on with this one individual that we're talking about. You get what I mean?
I mean, well, any individual, if,
right.
You know, someone comes to you and says, hey, like, the relationship is going sour.
Right.
I don't feel that connection anymore.
Right.
Then what do you do?
Right.
You know, if marriage is supposed to be like your relationship with God, you know, hey, does what you do ever turn sour and bitter to God? Like, and does he walk away from you?
Well, I mean, I think I can see where especially in a position where it doesn't feel like you're moving forward, or
there's no growth. I mean, but again, that's your
an individual thing.
That's your perspective,
right?
You know what I mean? So if you're always focused on the negative or whatever, then it's always going to look that way.
I mean, think about, so let's go back to the club mindset, right? So if you're up in the club, and then what does the club provide? You know, so one is the ultimate stimulation up front. whether it's and depending on which club you're going to, but it's going to be either flashing lights,
which is in some churches. Go ahead.
Right. Loud music.
In some churches.
Right. And then from a guy's perspective, some of the most slinkiest dressing women that you could find. Mm-hmm. You know, and so from a guy's perspective, and then let's not even talk about, you know, any kind of beverages they may be drinking that assist in that, along with some people that's smoking things or whatever else, which again, some churches, right? Everything I talked about really is almost interchangeable right now.
Right.
It really is. So if I were to explain that, some people might say, well, that happens in my church anyway, because of what? Come as you are.
Right.
Right? If you, and so people might be like, yo, Maurice, what are you talking about alcoholic beverages and things like that? Well, for some of us, we was getting it every first Sunday. Mm-hmm. You know, and the question had come up before about, hey, what if someone is a recovering alcoholic or whatever else, and your communion wine was one of the spiked ones? Mm-hmm. You get what I mean? You know, so it's a whole lot of things to consider with that. And again, that's a whole nother situation. That communion thing is funny. You know, but when we think about this, when it comes to relationships and the club versus the church and mindset and you know, whatever it is, how strong are we in these relationships if we're treating the church like the club? And ultimately, what is our real relationship with God in that? Right. But this is from the Last Pew. So this is supposed to be the unholy show. So don't take what I just said seriously, y'all. But
again, as you're saying, from the Last Pew, you see a whole lot of things going on.
Right.
And I can remember being young and knew young people joining the church or coming to church. They may not have joined, but we had a choir in the community and people started hearing about it and would want to join, or their friends were on there and would speak highly of it and they would come.
Right.
So, but a lot of times they would sit in the back and then wonder, like, well, who was that? Does he have a wife? You know, because they don't sit together. They don't associate with each other. Sometimes they come in separate cars, things like that. So it just seems such a disconnect that, again, marriage wasn't celebrated in the church.
I mean, to some degree, I'm not even sure if it's celebrated today.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
You get what I mean?
It's not. And I think we talked about this on the other podcast before. Like, we have, you know, Women's Day, we have Men's Day, we have Mother's Day and Children's Day and Father's Day, like all these things. But when do we celebrate marriage? I mean, I do recall being a youngster, you know, they would say happy birthday to people. If it was someone's anniversary, they would say happy anniversary and have that couple stand. But that wasn't that many people.
Well, even with that, let's think about this, though. For me, it was only when someone's anniversary was a large number. Mm-hmm. You get what I mean?
One of those Hallmark moment type,
right? You know,
but
so
even so, like, you know, you had said something about, okay, well, if you want to get a relationship, if you want to get somebody, you go to church. But for real, church ain't even talking about it. So why would you even go there?
Well, I would say they're talking about it in the sense of the singles ministries, right? You know, because all right, so if any young man was in the market and you go to any church, right? And they say, here's the singles ministry. I want all of you to join. Well, that's your pool up front, to be honest, if you want to find somebody.
You're pulling them and separating them from the group and saying, hey, you're single or whatever.
Right.
I mean, what is that preparing them for?
Well, so I think that's the question, because like, I know so many young ladies that are in their singles ministry where they are married to the idea of the singles ministry and not anything else.
Right. I think, again, it's pushing and motivating you being single and being all right. I'm okay being single.
Right.
You know, not that, hey, how do I get myself ready and prepared to be married? You know, how do I let go of certain things? So, you know, we talk about this a lot of times when we watch one of our date night shows, Married at First Sight. And those individuals are like in their mid-30s.
This episode,
this season, yes. And never married. Some of them, not in a serious relationship in years. And it's just like, now you want to throw them together and have them married. They don't even know how to be married.
Like one of my friends.
Commitments.
It's funny you said that. One of my friends that I talked to not too long ago, I interviewed her on the Neighbors podcast, plug, that she had mentioned, and we grew up together in our youth group or whatever else, right, in the AME church. And when I interviewed her and we had a conversation later on afterwards, she said, because she talked about how she's not married. I mean, she and I are the same age. Mm-hmm. She's not married, no kids or anything. And she said, Maurice, you know what? Even though my parents have been married for well over 50 years, but I was never taught how to date.
Right.
I was never taught how a man should really court me, in all honesty. Even though my parents have been married
court.
she said court.
Oh wow.
Well, she's she's not from Philly. Mm-hmm. She went to church in Philly. She's actually she lived in Jersey. So she's not quite hood, if you will. But I think it was in the context. I think it was a perfect word to use in the context of what we were talking about.
Right.
Of as you're stating, how are these people being prepared to get married, to look at marriage? I mean, we have so many friends that, and for us to be in our mid 40s, and we're like, I mean, me personally, I look at them like, wow, I have so many that's never been married.
Right.
And they're constantly looking. Mm-hmm. Like they're constantly looking, but in reality, what are you looking for? And do you understand the real elements of courting someone? And what did you want the outcome to really be if you were with an individual? Were you going in with the mindset of being in a club and just like a one night type thing? Let's keep it real.
Right.
You get what I mean? Or were you going in and saying, hey, let me date you for a while. Let's be friends. Let's talk about the news. Let's whatever it might be, to build a relationship / friendship, if you will, that will last longer than that one night.
Right.
That will, that can be sustainable over a 20, 30 year period. One thing I would say that, Kaffa and I, we talked on the phone for a long time before we even walked out on a date, to be honest, and so, now granted we would be on the phone until like 3-5 o'clock in the morning, and she got to turn around and get, leave out the house at 6 to go to work, but that's neither here or there.
We were young.
Yes, we were young, but let's be honest.
Can't do that now.
yo, we be in bed like 9:30,
Oh,
but
goodness. But, again, from the Last Pew perspective, so again, those that sit in the back, what are you seeing?
Right.
You know what I mean? What do you see? Like, do you see relationships? Do you see, even a relationship with members? Not even just husband and wife, but just members upon members. Do you really see positive relationships? So just something for everybody to think about. Right. From the Last Pew, like, what do people see when they come in?
I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you. Like those times when I've sat in the back of the church,
yeah,
you can tell if you're like me and a people watcher, you can see who's into who,
or who's not into who. Like I said, it's not even just a physical relationship.
Oh no! I'm not saying that.
Two sisters, two brothers, like, ain't they related? They don't talk.
Oh, yo, yeah, it's a whole lot of that too.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, just, well, why they still go here? Like, this is my church and this is okay. Well,
you get caught up in that relationship of, this is my church. I ain't going nowhere.
Right.
But you won't even talk to your sibling across the other side.
Yeah.
And on top of that,
even on the same pew.
I was about to say, y'all could be sitting on the same pew. I've seen that too.
Yeah.
That'd be funny too.
Right. So again, one thing, you being in the church and you knowing the situation and can understand it. But what about somebody who's just walking in as a guest or, thinking about joining the church? Like, what do they see?
Right.
Everybody gets on the ushers. Like, make sure the ushers are nice and they treat everybody respectfully when they come in the door and that they're smiling and all that kind of stuff. But what about the person in the pew?
Right.
The person they sit next to. Are they going to show them what page the song is on? Are they going to show them when it's time to stand? Or are they going to look at them like, why you ain't standing?
Right.
Why you doing? No, like that love and that goes all the way around.
Yeah, most definitely.
All the way around, so when that plate comes around, you can't look at them when they don't have anything to put in it. Like, all of that counts. So what's going on in your pew?
Yeah, that's a whole...
What's up with pews?
I don't know.
So...
I mean, but see, I know we're talking about the whole relationship thing where we're talking about separate and cross rooms and things like that. But, sometimes that pew life is real.
That pew life is real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow,
that's deep.
It's deep, all right, because I could see certain things right now. I'm like, wow, are y'all really, did y'all just really share a peppermint? Like, did you just put the peppermint in your mouth and crack it, and then you gave the other half to the other person?
Okay.
No, you're talking about that. I mean, that's deep.
Mm-hmm.
So, now I understand peppermints are hard and it's not easy to break and whatever else.
But you should bring more than one peppermint to church.
I mean, maybe that person really wanted to share.
Amen.
I mean, share and share alike.
Mm-hmm.
Love your neighbor as you love thyself.
Wow.
Okay, that's a little too deep.
Yeah.
So, but like Kafa was saying, let us know what you're feeling like. What's your pew like?
What's your pew like? Yes. Interesting. Very, very interesting. Thanks.
I mean, so let us know what your club is popping for and what's your interest fee, Yeah.
That might be the next episode. Should churches have an entrance fee?
But we love y'all.
Love you.
Hey, Kafa, what do we want them to do?
Maurice, we want everyone to stay fit with Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Follow, share, comment, and subscribe to the No Fruit Podcast.
Continue to listen to us on your favorite podcast channels.
And look for new episodes every Thursday.
We thank y'all very much for listening to us.
May God bless you all.
Peace.
We all know a guy who only occasionally shaves for big occasions, and it's because that occasional shave really hurts. It's the time of year for big occasions, and yet there he is, suffering with that cheap drugstore razor. Let's help him out. Henson Shaving's line of razors, built with aerospace precision, deliver a smooth shave your dad, brother, and even son can enjoy, eventually. With replacement blades just 10 cents each, you'll buy it once, and they'll use it for life. How's that for the perfect gift? Celebrate with 100 free blades on your first purchase, and no subscription headaches. HensonShaving.com/holiday.
Why don't more infant formula companies use organic, grass-fed whole milk instead of skim? Why don't more infant formula companies use the latest breast milk science? Why don't more infant formula companies run their own clinical trials? Why don't more infant formula companies use more of the proteins found in breast milk? Why don't more infant formula companies have their own factories instead of outsourcing their manufacturing? We wondered the same thing. So we made ByHeart, a better formula for formula. Learn more at byheart.com.